which was later occupied by Louisa Solano for many, many years. And it's gratifying to see that the Grolier is still in such devoted hands. So I'd also like to thank my daughter Sarah for setting up this event and for doing a wonderful last edit of The Stone in My Shoe. Sarah's a wonderful editor. Anyone here who has a manuscript in process, use her. I did it, she wrote my manuscript. And I'd like to thank all of you for showing up. Some of you are familiar faces, and I guess Sarah knows the rest of the audience. For the last year and a half, I've been traveling with two books. Teaching Arab's Writing Self by my late partner, Evelyn Shaker, and my own Stone in My Shoe, In Search of Neighborhood. And the books are about the ethnic cultures that we grew up in. The books were written more or less at about the same time, over a period of 2 years, and we're very much involved in each other's works in terms of our conversations with one another. We edited one another's manuscripts. I think Evelyn benefited less from my editing than I did from her. She's a wonderful editor as well. I think what emerged as we worked on these memoirs is how important it was to have an awareness of one another's roots and cultures, but how much more important it was to have an awareness and to be able to celebrate the other person's culture. And when I've been reading, as I mentioned, from both books over the last year and a half, and I think I'll continue to do so, especially with this German translation coming out, and that remains important for me. I mean, the importance of having one's sensors up and out, basically, in order to see other cultures, to respond to other cultures, to appreciate other cultures. So let me start by reading a section from Evelyn's memoir, and it's from one of the early essays entitled At Home and Away, 13 Takes on Growing Up Arab in America. From my childhood, I remember postcards that came in the mail. By the way, can you hear me at the back?
Okay.
Yes, a little louder.
A little louder? Thank you.
Maybe he stood up.
No.
Scream if I'm not reading loud enough. And scream in a loud voice so that I
He
can
wants
hear you.
to stand now, he's comfortable.
Okay, here goes. From my childhood, I remember postcards that came in the mail with Arabic writing on the back and stamps featuring some beefy man with abundant whiskers and a fez. Zachli, my father would say, pointing to the gray or sepia photograph on the front, caressing it with his thumb. Just home from work, he'd hold it under a table lamp or, in summer, take it to the kitchen window. Silhouetted against the late afternoon light, a man in his 50s, then 60s, then 70s, each year his back more stooped from hours hunched over a printing press, his round eyes watery from tweezing characters out of a box and setting each page of text by hand. With the photo tilted this way, then that, he'd shift his glasses to study it more closely. What was he looking for in its shadow? What had he lost? At 16, my father had come to America. At 75, he died, without seeing home again. The postcards as close as he came. Even as a child, I knew that slump of flat-roofed houses squatting on a hillside meant the world to him. But my idea of pretty was yellow flowers, green grass, and white clapboard houses on streets shaded with sugar maples. In the morning, my mother went to a factory, my father to his press. The New Deal press, he called it, in honor of the patrician president who cared about the little man. Meanwhile, I was off to school where I grew up with Dick and Jane. But more than the storybook words, it was the sun-washed illustrations that taught me what was beautiful and right. Mother at the door in a checked gingham apron, waving goodbye to father, who wore a fedora and carried a briefcase, blue-eyed baby Sally gurgling in her crib, and best place in the world, grandmother and grandfather's farm, with golden haystacks, snow-white lambs. For years, when grown-ups asked me, wouldn't you like to visit the old country? I'd remember my father's dismal postcards and say, no. The last section. Evelyn, incidentally, was terrified of flying. I think in her mind I was responsible for keeping the plane stable. On my first trip to Lebanon, I changed planes in Paris. At Orly, I was already seated and strapped in when passengers were instructed to disembark. In the afternoon sun, our luggage had been lined up on the tarmac, and each of us stepped forward to identify our bags. Then we were herded back on board. I trooped on with the others, although I knew the plane was going to crash. Disaster, mayhem. How had I forgotten? This is what the Middle East was all about. I'd wanted this trip for the adventure and to see my parents' homeland. Times had changed. Black was beautiful, exotic was in, the melting pot was yesterday's thinking. But I'd been apprehensive from the start and met with a psychiatrist to talk it out. He didn't understand. 4 hours from Paris to Beirut, I figured the bomb was scheduled to explode midway. The next morning, I sat on the terrace of the Hotel Melkart, named after the ancient king of the underworld and protector of the universe, drinking in the scents of jasmine and white gardenia, nursing a demi-tasse of sweet Turkish coffee. In the distance ahead, gulls rode the sea breezes like a roller coaster. Below them, in a dazzle of sunlight, the blue-green Mediterranean kept on to the horizon. Ghost ships passed, silhouetted against the pale sky, high, proud Phoenician vessels plowing their way from Byblos, Beirut, Tyre, Sidon, voyaging to North Africa, on through the straits, into open, unknown waters, and steamships traveling in their wake, carrying my parents and my grandparents. Later in the morning, I would find a driver to take me to my mother's village, where my aunt was waiting, and on another day inland to Zachmy. "You're going home." My mother had said it like a promise. Time would tell, I thought. For now, it was enough to have leapt borders and landed safely, to perch for this half hour on this threshold, anonymous, unclaimed, and hostage only to my own imaginings. I have seldom been so content. Isn't that splendid writing?